we watch the movie, and we could skip over a few places. It's about an hour and 25 minutes. We don't have the screen. So I prepared as best I could kind of translation of the captions and the dialogue. Basically, everything that's regular prose, in other words, it's not in quotation marks, is the subtitles or captions, which are only in Japanese. There's no English, unfortunately. Really, no one is speaking in Portuguese at all. This is really a film that was made, a documentary that was made in Japan for a Japanese audience. So the quotation marks are from the people interviewed. Occasionally the interviewers ask questions. We don't get to see their faces. They don't actually tell us who they are. If they're professors or just independent filmmakers or students or whatever. But it was produced in conjunction with, what's the name of the university? There we go. Hamamatsu Gakuin University, sort of area study center. So, okay. So let's watch the film, and you can sort of look. We'll look on, and if I think there's something worth noting, I'll bring it to you. Is the volume on the was there something I need to turn on here as well? Oh, sorry. There. What's it? Little place. So the music that we're hearing is Brazilian hip hop that's about life in Rio de Janeiro. It actually has nothing to do with Japan. So the lyrics of the song is talking about drugs and guns and life in Rio as a criminal, bandit, and Jew. So the first person we see isn't going to be interviewed. There are 5 who are in the film, and I would say 4 are sort of prominent, 3 especially. So he's not part of the film yet. So this is right here. talking about the harassment that kind of young workers, that they're just hanging out with their friends on the street and they get subject to police abuse, subject to people saying, hey, go back to your country. Saying, I go to work every day, we pay taxes like everybody else. We want them to recognize that we're a part of this society. We're not just like criminals or something. So what is the situation of the Japanese Brazilians, the Nikkei Brazilians today? So I've seen the film a few times. We'll turn the volume down a bit. I've seen the film a few times, and you notice this house, this apartment rather, where the first of our main subjects lives, is like right near the freeway, right? It's a temporary place to live that's provided by the labor recruitment company. Right. So his name is Satake Eduardo. He's 19 years old, 4th generation Nikkei. The essential thing here is that this opening sequence of the film takes place before the economy crashes. So this represents sort of a very brief window before the situation, the economic situation totally changes. So, we'll learn more as we go along, but we see him now starting his day at 7 a.m. going to the factory, and then he works a 12-hour shift, right? He comes home at 7 p.m. We're going to see him coming home. And his day is not over. So he eats, he changes his clothing, and then we see him going off to a school to help tutor kids in English. This is just explaining what I was saying earlier. So, saying 17 years ago, right, his mother came to Japan as dekasegi and brought him with him. So he was born in Brazil, actually, and came when he's 2 years old. Got cute cheeks. I'll turn the volume back up a little bit. So one of the things you'll notice about most of the Nikkei in the film is that they're of mixed racial background. Sometimes the mother, sometimes the father is Japanese. So he's just talking about the disruption in family life. His mother brought him back to Brazil, and then she went back to Japan. His father died when he was 8. His mom came back and brought him to Japan again. So in contrast to what the reading was about, talking about engineers and doctors and what have you, who left their middle-class lives in Brazil where they potentially weren't making any money. The job market was terrible. You go work in factories and make a lot of money relative to Brazil. If they took that money home in Brazil, they'd be quite wealthy. So this is already a very different situation where we have these 5 young subjects, young people, they're not subjects per se of an anthropological study, but they're just being interviewed here. And he's saying, if you work in a factory, you make money. So it's a good thing because he doesn't cause his mom or his family any trouble, right? He's able to take care of himself. But the problem is, when you work in a factory, he said, you don't learn anything. It's just the same routine every day. And without education, you can't improve your situation. So your future is never going to get any better than what it is now. Now, as we learn in the documentary, he has not even gone to high school. Several of the kids, like, they left middle school and started working in the factory. Remember how old he is now? He's 19 years old, right? It's like you're 19 years old and from an educational standpoint, your life is over. Right? You finished school when you were, what, 13, 14 years old? Right? He's already been working for a few years now. Okay. This is another, his name is Yuri, Suzuki Yuri, also 19, and former gang leader. It's all there if you just read it. I tried to be as thorough as I could. It's a little hard to see it. So he has the tattoo that says "hustling" on his left wrist, left top of the hand. Right. He has the teardrop on the side of his eye, which usually in American prison culture means you killed someone, which he clearly has not. It also looks like he tattooed his eyelids. I can't tell exactly, but you'll see. So how they formed this street gang to get respect from other Brazilians. Talking about the fact that the Japanese don't really respect them, and so in a certain sense, as you say now, they kind of gravitate towards the underworld or the underground culture, because that's where they get respect from. Mainstream Japanese society doesn't treat them well. So he was arrested for, I think, selling drugs, something like that. They said he was caught reckless driving, as you saw, leaning out the window and driving. I'm not quite sure what he's referring to here, but I think he was looking at the those flat screens on the back of the seat, so you can get about $450 for each one, and that represents like a week's worth of work in a factory. So here he is with like his best friend who came to get him when he got out of the youth reformatory, and you can see. The visuals also say a lot, not just what they're saying. So he's talking about when he first got arrested, his father wouldn't come see him, didn't go to the court, didn't want to talk to him afterwards, and his girlfriend dumped him, and so his friend there kind of stuck with him, but he had to take responsibility for his actions. There was no one else to blame but himself. I'm keeping the volume a little bit low so I don't have to compete with them. But if you listen to the voice intonation, even if you don't know Japanese, you can hear he talks like an immature kid who kind of his mouth is moving faster than his thought process. So it's like, you know what I mean, yeah, sort of like that kind of way of talking. He's saying now, the most important thing he realized after he was arrested was the importance of family. Like in this immigrant community, Dekasegi community, a lot of people coming and going, The people who are always like by your side and saying a family. right? He's saying when you're a dekasegi, you go where the work is, and when the work dries up, you go back to Brazil or you move. That's just the way it is. That's the way it goes. I mean, in a certain sense, his life is a young life is a rejection of that. He doesn't want to work in a factory. He wants easy money. He wants respect, but they don't have. Let me just pause it for 1 second. They don't have the educational opportunities to advance, right? They're not given the time to mature, right? Like we have a chance to go to high school. I don't usually view high school as a particularly glorious form of education, but right, they don't go to high school. They're not going on to college, much less graduate school, and they're expected to go work in the factories, not just by the Japanese society at large, but also by their families, who often are depending on them to contribute as soon as they can. And that's true whether it's family in Brazil or the family back in Japan. As we've already seen a little bit, we see more as we go along, the complicated family relationships. So Eduardo, there's two Eduardos, but this one that we've seen just now, winds up being the only one in his family in Japan and trying to work and make money and sort of help his mom. He has a younger sister who is half-sister, right? His father died. His mother, I don't know if she got married or not, but she has a child with another man, and this is his sister, so he wants to go back to Brazil to see them and to be reunited with his family, but he also wants to make money in Japan, where the money that he sends back to Brazil will go much farther. So in the first generations of dekasegi who went to Brazil, they would send money home to Japan, and now we see the opposite is happening, money being sent from Japan back to Brazil. The next one, her name is, she goes by Paula, her name is, where was it? Page 3. Sato Ayumi Paula. She's only 15 when we start following her, right? In her case, born and raised in Japan. So she, when they talk about going back to Japan, they usually use like the verb kaeru, which means you return to somewhere. Usually when you use that verb, it's like I wouldn't say, I'm going back to Japan using that. I could say that tomorrow I'm going back to Japan, but when you talk about what country you're from, right? That's sort of the notion of return that we're talking about. She is by nationality Brazilian because her parents are Brazilians. I stopped it here because I wanted to focus on sort of one of these legal issues that's very important to understand. But before I get to that, just finish the thought. She's never been to Brazil, right? So she has no idea what it's like. And as we see in the course of the film, all the little details really show this. She thinks in Japanese. She speaks both languages, but Japanese is her, sort of the language of her heart, something like that. Now, legally, children of foreign nationals are not required to do compulsory education in Japan. So that's why these kids, who otherwise would have to go to high school, are able to just basically drop out or just graduate from junior high school and then they're done. Okay. And so this is a huge problem. One of the things we see with all five is that there's a gravitation towards street culture, but the mainstream culture is not really supporting their presence in the same way as full citizen Japanese. right? So the difference, the legal distinction between Nikkei and Nihonjin, right, is real in this particular context. You know, if they don't have a good education in Portuguese, after all, they're not living really in a Portuguese-speaking country. They just speak, you know, Portuguese at home with their parents, their friends. They listen to maybe popular music or whatever. And then their Japanese is also not really sufficient because, you know, they may not be able to read Chinese characters. You know, they may not have the proper education to speak politely, right? That you would need to do a lot of service-related work, much less, you know, white-collar work. And then the other thing that we'll see, especially in Paula's case, is that her parents decide to go back to Brazil. And number one, she's a minor, she's only 15, so she can't stay she sort of does stay in Japan by herself a little bit longer than her parents, which is in itself perhaps shocking to us, right? To see a 15-year-old left behind to kind of finish up moving. But it's not just that she's a minor, but because she's a fourth generation Nikkei, she doesn't have the right to remain or to come back to Japan, meaning to work and so forth, without her parents. So the laws, the rules that are in place are surprisingly harsh. There's not an equality at all in this immigration loophole. So we shouldn't be confused when we say, oh, well, you know, the Nikkei are able to come back to Japan and live and work. Well, yes, that was true in the 90s, early 2000s when the economy was good and the factories needed labor. But what we see happen after 2008 is precisely that the factories are all closing, they don't need the work, and you know, as I think I said to you at day one, I was there, I saw what was happening firsthand, that the Japanese government actually was encouraging people to leave. And they would offer to pay for a plane ticket home, and they wanted for those people who took that option to not have the right to come back to Japan for 7 years. There was a big outcry that this was discrimination. You know, and it was really like a terrible way to treat people who had been working hard, you know, doing manual labor in Japan. And then, you know, Japan is basically saying, we'll pay for you to leave so that you won't be on welfare, so we won't have to pay for you when you have no work, right? It was a very mercenary, very cold way of treating these people. So, okay, I hope that's a little bit of context. We can kind of keep going. Sorry. Just saying, suddenly my parents decided, you know, announced that we're going to go back to. So I was born and raised in Japan. I've never been to Brazil. I don't really know what it would be like. All my friends are here. She also graduated from high school, junior high school, and started working in a factory. But she's 15 years old. The interviewer was asking, she was saying, you know, it's good that you work, you make money, right, you help your family, and he said to her, do you think, you know, would you like to work in Japan in the future, you know, keep working in Japan in the future? And she said, I don't think there's a future for me here. And he's saying, you know, without graduating from high school, there's no future for us. Yeah, she said, let me just pause this. So she's saying, without that more advanced education, you can't, even in the factory, right? Even if you're like really hard worker or whatever, you can't go beyond a very low-level managerial role. So you go from factory floor to like maybe supervisor, right? But you don't get anywhere beyond that. So her father said to her, it would be better to go back to Brazil and, you know, sort of do your education there and you know, have the chance for a better life. Here in Japan, there's no shot. In her case, we don't know this until the very end. Her father is Nikkei Japanese. Her mother is something else, you know, maybe Italian or whatever. You know, who knows? But you know, most of the people who were interviewed and their families, from what we can see, are not educated people. They're all working class people. So they have really, it's likely that they have very little literacy in Japanese. And it's, you know, as you know, it's incredibly hard to acquire. And so therefore, the idea that, oh, you know, we'll send Paola to college in Japan or something, it's like, you know, totally out of the realm of possibility. Whereas at least in Brazil, right, they can, you know, she can get better education, she can have other work opportunities, they're not going to be discriminated against in the same ways as they are in Japan. So we really see the window is closing for this Nikkei existence in Japan. And you know, this is what they're talking about, that these are, she's 15 and he's a little bit older, not her boyfriend, this is like a friend of hers, but you know, basically they're very aware of the fact that they have no place in Japanese society. I'm also just noticing the Smirnoff and the beer cans.
She's underrated.
Yeah, well, anyway, you'll see other things too. So she feels the tension, the pull of both sides. Her father is saying, come back to Brazil and sort of get your life on track there. But she was born and raised in Japan, all her friends are there, and she's, she's starting to cry. She's like, you know, all her friends are here. I don't know anyone in Japan. I don't know anyone in Brazil, so. And again, as a 15-year-old who's not allowed to come back to Japan without her family, who don't plan to come back to Japan, this is really, like, this is it. She won't see her friends anymore. This is her younger brother, Eni, who's 14. The documentary filmmakers gave her a camera to sort of, so she's interviewing her brother, it's kind of cute. She's asking him the same questions, like, how do you feel about leaving Japan? He said, well, you know, I'm going to miss my girlfriend. And she's like, you don't have a girlfriend. That's very cute. And this is her boyfriend, who's 19 years old. I was more surprised by that than the beer, but so the three of them are in this like, little, you know, one-room apartment with everything sort of packed for her to leave. And it's like her parents basically left her, I guess, with her boyfriend. She's 15. you know, this is also part of the cultural difference of this Deikasegi world. I mean, things that we would never assume part of like mainstream Japanese society is, you know, basically kids who are 15, 16 years old are growing up very fast. So she's not melting ice, she's not making drugs. These are those little, like, the Japanese call them prikura photos, remember these? Come on, you all remember. This is before smartphones. So she's melting these like rubber molds to put the pictures in and make like an album. Remember, this is like 2007, 2008? It's really shocking. I mean, I think in some ways she's the heart of the film. She and the boy Eduardo, who seems to really want an education. But it's really shocking that we go back and forth with her between being like a really, you know, a girl and being a woman. Like she really is sort of having to grow up fast.
だから、私はものすごく行きたくないし、ずっとそばにいたいけど、親の決めたことだから。
She wants to be with a boyfriend, but her parents have decided they're going to go back. And this is where it's saying, you know, she doesn't have the right to return to Japan on her own. So this is, you know, saying this is goodbye for them. One thing I'll also point out, just to try to help make sense of it, is these different narratives of the different people are not happening simultaneously. So the events with Paola, I think, happen a little bit earlier, because we see, you know, we'll see them after they've gone back to Brazil. And it's like, Paola has been back for a year or 2 years. So-and-so has only been back for 6 months. So there's different temporalities happening. This is where they're saying in 2008, the Lehman shock happens, and a lot of the families lose their jobs. We're following some of the guys who remained even after that. So this is this breakdancing crew who call themselves the Floor Monsters. So there's 2 of them. Number 4, who was also in Eduardo but goes by the nickname Polka, and then his friend Otavio, who's not, we see Otavio later, he's not really announced very clearly. So when I was making this up, I was like, wait, where's number 5? I had to go back, and I was like, oh, he's number 5, okay. So this is this guy, Polka, 22 years old. He just mentioned his friends. Otavio was like the founder of the group, and he's like the second leader after, I guess, Otavio left. He's talking about kind of continuity that this group has created in the lives of the members, that they teach each other the techniques, they learn together. So it's not just like, you know, taking, like they're not just going to sit around like drinking or something. They have something constructive and cultural that they can do together. So dance is their, you know, they don't have the opportunity for education. Now maybe they're out of work. So this is something positive that they can do, you know, together. So he came to Japan 15 years ago. not 15 years, he's been in Japan for 15 years, so he came when he was a kid. So both his parents, this is the bottom of page 3, but both his parents lost their jobs. You know, here as well, we see the guys talking about what they learned from each other and their friendship. They think of each other as like brothers. And we see a lot of the same sort of tearful moments because you have to leave. You have to leave Japan. You don't see your friends again. So the group, I think, is something like about 8 years old. Right, so there's Octavio on the right. So these are guys who've been friends for a long time. They didn't have, you know, they didn't even go to high school, right? They didn't go to college. They didn't have those opportunities to form, you know, friendships in school. These are the friendships they made. It's the culture that they kind of built up without any support from anyone else, right? Not from their family, not from society. It's just them sticking together. And I don't think the film makes this like really that clear. It's like, you know, I kind of had to watch it a few times. When you translate every single word, you pay attention, but it's really. Because when I first watched it, I didn't really like get emotionally involved. But the more I watch it and understand how painful these experiences are. I mean, they're not just crybabies. They're not crying because they're, you know, like weak personalities or something. I think it's just the opposite. We're seeing very strong people at the breaking point. You're basically being rejected by the country that you were born in and grew up in. So we're back to the other Eduardo, and so, you know, after the Lehman shock, his job dried up. So he got a phone call. They said, "You don't have a job anymore. No one's working." He would go to this social welfare office that has the really creepy name Hello Work. It's all over Japan. I passed one in Kyoto, and I was thinking about this as well. I had a girlfriend at the time when I was in Nagoya. This was summer 2009, and I went with her to Hello Work. And she couldn't read Japanese, but you know, obviously I could. And I'd look through the job booklets, and it was like, you know, 800 yen, like less than like $8 an hour to work in like an old people's home, like cleaning, you know, changing diapers and washing them and things like that. So the jobs that remained were really not like, especially for the amount of money that were being paid, things that any young person would want to be doing. So he's saying, you know, he would get leads from Hello Work, and they'd call, and they'd never call back. This is part of, you know, let me just pause it for a second here. Some of this is the film, some of it's me, but I'm trying to fill in the blanks a little bit, because I think that's also my job. But, you know, the people at Hello Work are full-time employees. They're public servants in Japan. So they get a salary. They get benefits. They, go to work in the morning in nice clothing, and they leave at the end of the day, and they go home. And they send their kids to school, and da-da-da-da. So they have to do their job, which is to give leads to these people like Eduardo. But there was no work. So, he just wastes his time, like chasing after phantom jobs, basically. And so we'll see him, find a job, and it works out for a little while, and then it doesn't. He has to go back to Japan. Spoiler alert, it's all here. But basically, the Japanese people in mainstream society have the jobs that he's sort of helping with. He's just like on the side. So, there's a real like first class, second class citizen dynamic that, again, the documentary doesn't really like push. It doesn't make it as clear as it could be that this is the way that they're treated. If anything, the film simply follows their lives, and it seems like, well, he's, tough luck. It didn't work out. But there's a structural level to this that the film is not really emphasizing. So let's keep watching, and I think you'll see what I'm talking about.
こんな辛い生活をするなら自分の国にいた方がいい。
He's saying, if life's going to be this tough in Japan, I'd rather go back to Brazil. Right, and here was the part about his sister. He wants to go back and see his little sister. Seeing his little sister is like one of the main reasons. The interviewers are asking him questions, of course. So they asked, how do you feel about being Dekasegi? And he said, I don't have any regrets. Just the opposite. The challenges made me a stronger person. And for her too. This is his 17-year-old girlfriend, who also didn't go to high school, and started working. The two of them have a lot in common. Their thinking, the hardships they went through. Let me stop it again. I think this is really like a pivot. I don't know if I want to call it like the artifice or the construction of the narrative, but this is the top of page 4. Let's just kind of look at it together, because I think this is like, as something to read and understand, this is sort of the most important thing. He was saying a moment ago, right, when he would call and he would try to get a job and no one wanted to return his calls, right? He says, what changed most was that Japan became a place he didn't like anymore. I'm not complaining or anything, he says, but as a Brazilian, I feel like I've reached my limit. Everyone has left, and everyone left with a bad feeling about it. They didn't want to leave, but they had no choice. That's the worst part of being here now. And then, what if you don't find work? I want to go back to Brazil. If I have to deal with such hard living conditions, I'd rather leave. My mother has my little sister there. That's the biggest reason for me to go back. I'm glad that I came here, and although I had a lot of tough memories, it made me who I am. That's true of her too. The camera pans over to his girlfriend, who we just saw, Chiemi, who is a 17-year-old Nikkei. Right. So just to repeat what he just said, right? We have a lot in common, our way of thinking, the challenges we faced. Around the war era, our great-grandparents fled to Brazil. For sure, they had a much worse time of it. It's only natural that we inherited that strength from them. And then the caption says he attributes his and Chiemi's strength as something that came from their forebears, who left Japan for Brazil. So here too is a moment in which if the documentary was stronger, you could cut back to history, you know, show pictures of people getting on the boat, you know, cutting lumber in the forest. No, there's no talk about coffee, like at all. Nobody goes back and works in coffee fields. That's all over for these people. And in fact, we'll see when they go back to Brazil, they all go back to different places. It's not like these people are all from the same neighborhood or something. But the part here that I think really was a missed opportunity is to show, right, this population of people now in a fourth generation, maybe a fifth on the way, right, that have been basically doing manual labor, right? First in Brazil, now they're doing it in Japan, and they're not getting out of that sort of cycle of dekasegi. I don't want to say poverty, but they're certainly in a very difficult situation. Now, of course, back in Brazil, there are very successful Japanese, Japanese Brazilians, descendants of the original immigrants, who did move up the ladder through education and so forth.
That's because economical differences between Brazil and Japan, or political different way to treat those in Japan and Brazil?
Well, everyone who went to Brazil, in theory, right, when we talk about it in general terms, we often talk about poor, rural, labor. Some people probably came to Brazil with money, with some resources, more than others. Some people were more successful, some people were, luckier. And it may have just been the difference between being in the right place at the right time. I should say grandma or grandpa or great-grandfather was more successful and was able to provide a better life. And so people are splitting off a bit. But there's this some core population. I think the Angelo Ishipi says at one time, at the beginning of this film, it says at one point there were over 300,000 of these Nikkei in Japan. I don't think they were all from Brazil, because there are a lot of people came from Peru and Bolivia and so forth as well. But the vast majority were Brazilian. That was, by the beginning of World War II, there were about 30,000 Japanese immigrants in Peru, and there were 188,000 in Brazil. So the numbers are not even close. But again, for the people who didn't exit the dekasegi cycle, right? It's quite amazing to think that now it's moved from Brazil back to Japan, and we're in a fourth generation. Right? People who don't have the educational opportunities, the social mobility, and they're kind of trapped in a condition of low wage, insecurity. There's not much of a social or a familial safety net for them.
これは本当失礼。で、うちらはこの人たちくらいに強くなって当たり前。
So he finds work as the coordinator, that's what they call it here, for this course that's being held at a local college for people to brush up on their Japanese. This is in Hamamatsu, the city of Hamamatsu. But as we see, Eduardo is driving the students to and from the class.
日本で仕事するために勉強する。 まあそれもあるし、
right? And what he's saying here is like
もう日本にいるもんで、
he has to study to get better work,
いつも
and he has to work to be able to study.
日本のそういうところを知らないといつまでもやっていけないと思う。
So here he is at the college that he's helping out at, and again we have someone, it's hard to tell from her clothing, she looks Brazilian to me, but there's someone who's like the actual teacher, and then he's like standing in the back and kind of helping translate and just providing on the spot help. So he's not the teacher, he's not like a real coordinator like the boss, he's like just an assistant.
それは問題ですね。まあ今一番
It looks like Enrique
やりたい
Iglesias
の
or
は
something, doesn't it?
ブラジルへ帰るより他の国へ行って英語をまず勉強して英語をマスター
One
し
of
て
the real paradoxes here is that
この
here's a young man
目的は
who really wants to learn and is helping other people learn, but he himself hasn't had the educational opportunities.
もう体力だけの仕事から出てもっと認められる仕事ともっとやってて気持ちいい仕事が見つかってほしいですね。みんな
Ultimately, everybody wants to get educated and find work that they can, sort of take pride in and enjoy doing. The factory work is not mentally stimulating. It's just something that a robot, couldn't do, and you're basically the robot. So now this is Paula back in Brazil with her family. They're sleeping basically on futons on the floor, which Brazilians don't do. And a lot of the blankets and other stuff look, like they brought them back from Japan. I wrote in the notes that's her mother, but it's definitely not her mom, who appears later. So that's my mistake. But look at the scale of the house compared to Japan. The tile floors and, they're clearly living in a more urban environment. She's interviewing her brother, and she said, what do you miss about Japan? He said, I miss my girlfriend. He's like, you don't have a girlfriend. I like her brother, he's kind of like chubby and easygoing. You can tell the two of them are like really close. So, in a weird way, like the material comfort level of being in Brazil is way better. I find that true with Korea versus Japan too. Like, you go to a restaurant and they have like a salad bar, like all you can eat, like kimchi or whatever. And in Japan they give you like a little tiny amount for like, and you have to pay for it. It's extra. But there's really big differences that they're not getting into. But what we see here is Paula listening to Japanese pop music. She's keeping in touch with her boyfriend over internet. It's a little hard because the volume is low, but you can see from her expressions, even when she was showing herself on the camera earlier, she's kind of like, she has like a pained expression on her face, She's not really fully accepting of the reality of being back in Brazil. But again, back in Brazil is not the right way of saying it because she had never been in Brazil. Unlike the others who were at least, they were born in Brazil, they left when they were 2. It doesn't mean there's a big difference. But she was born and raised in Japan. The whole film is in Japanese. These people are all bilingual, of course. But you don't get the impression from any of them that being interviewed in Japanese, especially in moments of emotional breakdown, is a difficulty for them. This is a language that comes totally naturally for them. I didn't look that carefully. I think it's all Portuguese. So she's now, getting to her 17th birthday, so it's 2 years since she had left. She's talking about how she's thinking about the future. She says, there's only 2 things I think about, today and tomorrow. She's just living day to day, basically. She doesn't have a long-term plan yet. But she's 17 years old. When you were 17 years old, did you have a plan for 5-year plan for the? No, you just went to school. So this is Octavio, who was the 5th one, and he's still. This is back. Still, when he's back in Japan. So he was the first leader of this group they called Floor Monsters. And he tried to postpone his plans to go back to Brazil to keep the group going. So the team has had an 8-year run, and they don't want to let it fall apart. Everybody has to do their part. So people live in really small houses. They don't have public space. Right? So they're basically just doing this out by the train station. And you can see how the police come by and see these juvenile delinquents breakdancing, playing loud music, dressed like American rap stars or gangsters or whatever, and they don't like it. They started the group in this at the Kakegawa train station. The 3 of them were the founders. So what started with 3 turned into 15, 20. They kind of filled the whole space with dancers. It's hard to tell what time this is, but probably it's after midnight when the train station is closed and nobody's around. But they don't turn the lights off, so what is it that Hemingway called it? A clean, brightly lit place? That was for drinking, but this is probably healthier. we're back to Yuri, the sort of gangster wannabe with his friends, and they've found this like basically hangout pad. I don't know, this apartment that they're using. Crash pad maybe. He gives us a little tour of the apartment, and MySpace is that. It's kind of a joke because it's a dump, right? But it's like at least they have a place of their own to hang out, to live. Again, these are kids, they don't have their own money, and he's pointing out how badly built this apartment is. He's like, it's a dump, but I like it. It's,
日本でだったらここで一番の場所は自分
It's a really old apartment, but that's cool as long as I can be here in Japan. I don't
い
care.
ろいろとこの家で問題がありましたし、いろいろとあったんですけど、警察が来ます。ピンポンって。その時にお母さんが来ました。2回ともお母さんが来ました。なぜでしょう。いろんな嫌なことがあったんですけど、ここに帰ってくれば必ず家族のぬくもりがありましたし、もうそれの時も、娘に癒さの時も、みんな止められたりして、もう家に帰らないといけない状況になれば、ここに帰れば家族のぬくもり
Takes me a while sometimes to actually get the thread of what he's saying. He's saying like these guys who stick together like in a
家
gang.
族の存在があって、今後そういう場所が
It's kind of like a surrogate family. You've got people who you can count on and stick together. Sometimes you can't go home. You have people here. They're here for you.
本当さっき言ったようにもう1円ぐらいで仕事変わったりして、なのでなんていうんですかね、そういうお金のことばっかり気にしてる親を見て、2通りがあると思うんですよ。子供を選ぶ道の中で同じお金好きになるのか、それをリスペクトできなくなるのかで、それあると思うんですよ。海に来るのはお金目当てだから、お金をもう言葉通りで稼ぎながら違う意味で親を尊敬できなくなったんですけど、そういうお金の部分では自分もお金好きになってしまって、自分がその家族を養う
I don't know if he's like on drugs or if he has like ADD. He has a lot of trouble putting his thoughts. You can see he's struggling to put his thoughts together. He was talking about these issues like with money, make money to get respect, especially like from his family. He's talking about this problem he has with his father because he got arrested and his father doesn't even want to talk to him.
思ってお父さんを不必要な存在として見るようになり、お父さんに対する尊敬を失ってしまった部分もあると思います。
So he wants to get back.
やはり
He wants to get that relationship back with his father.
真正面につけられないと。
And so one of the reasons that he's going to go back to Brazil is to try to reconnect with his dad, who's already left Japan. He too, Paolo, who's 15, he's a little bit older, he's a boy, whatever, but, he's also a kid, and he's basically on his own, not making great decisions, and, so we're back to Eduardo, and he was caught, he was arrested with possession of, I guess, marijuana, and as a result, he's going to lose his visa, his right to live in Japan. we can see like his hair is all messed up, and he hasn't shaved, and you know his room is a mess. So, you know, he's a long way from where we started, where he was like, you know, working 12 hours a day and dressed for work, and you know, now it's like the whole thing is unraveling.
その時にチームが一緒だったので、チームは隣にいたので全部聞いてた。で、あいつ俺を慰めようとして、結婚しようよって言った。
So his girlfriend,
多分残れるんじゃないのって。
you know, the interview's asking what's going to happen with your girlfriend, kind of expecting she's going to just.
でも
And he said, no, you know, she tried to, you know, cheer me up and this and that, and, you know, basically said, let's get married, and thinks that's probably what's going to happen. But of course, she would have to leave Japan too.
けど今本当は帰れない。母さんも妹があっちにいるので、
So,
俺が帰ればすぐ仕事が見つかるかどうかわかんないし、
he's trying to help support his mom and his sister, and when he goes back to Brazil, he doesn't know if he's going to find work.
せめて
His last time he was there, he was like, what, 4 years
もっ
old?
と仕事頑張って大学のために
So,
金を集めたいし、
he wants to save money, he wants to study,
うちの母さんと妹のためにも。
but he has that responsibility to his family to try to help
だから本当
support them.
今帰らされたら困る。
So being sent back to Brazil at this moment in time is really like a bad situation for him. Here's Otavio again, and this was the day that he has to say goodbye to his, or the day when he's leaving Japan is approaching. This is also kind of like a horror movie, like one after another they get sent. You know, it's all, not a horrible thing to go back to Brazil per se, but you know, they're all really attached to Japan, even though they're not rich, they're not embraced by mainstream society as a class of people, but this is their home. This is where all their friends are, the language they speak. I think. Sorry, I missed this piece in my notes. I was doing this last minute.
なんでかというと、また俺がブラジルに帰っても彼たちはまだ続けるようにしたいので。
Even though I'm going back to Brazil, I want them to continue with the team. And you know, here as well, we have the documentary cutting back and forth. We just saw a piece of this conversation, and then the breakdance history, and then we just came back to the same conversation. So they're creating a narrative out of cuts and editing. He wants to keep going with the group back in Brazil too, because there are a lot of members who are heading up. It'd be cool to like get everybody together and have a big show there as well. So when new members come in, like what do? Like, you know, try to teach them and train together. So, you know, he's saying, you know, that we talk about effort, the effort that goes into breakdancing and teaching new people and learning things themselves. Right? That's the structure of their life. That's what they're focused on. So okay, we cut back now to Eduardo, who's, you know, packing up to leave Japan.
自分が悪いことしたのは認めてるし、最初から正直に
He's saying,
ちゃんと
I
全部
took full responsibility for what I did. I admitted I was wrong. Oh, that's weird. Sorry about that.
日本で育って日本人みたいに税金払ってきて日本人みたいに生きてきて
Saying, you know, I
日本のためにも努力して
was raised in Japan. I pay taxes in
強制
Japan,
送還っていうのは
same as everyone
俺
else.
は納得いかない
And I just can't accept that
俺
I'm
に
being
言った
treated this
分
way.
かりようとして
It's like I did one stupid thing and they're kicking me out of the country, even though I've spent my whole life here working.
やっぱ本当お互い本当に好きで妊娠して
Chiyomi is now pregnant, and they really care about each other.
でまあ
So
お互い早いうちに大学も行きたいしまだまだこれから勉強も仕事も
we
頑
both
張
want
ら
to go to college
頑張らなきゃいけないことが多いし
and work hard to make a good future for themselves.
かなり悪い状況だし
So it's a really
本当辛いけど今は子供を産めることはできないって判断して
I mean, I'm just like, let me just stop for a second. I'm kind of
俺も
obviously you notice the camera is on him, although there's a camera on me too. You know, he's really calm and collected, and he's saying like the situation is really tough, it's terrible, but you know we're gonna try to make the best of it, persevere, etc. But again, this is one of these moments where here you've got two young people who have, you know, they when there were jobs to be done, they were working, right? They helped their families. They, you know, want to make their own family. Now his girlfriend is pregnant, and they're going to kick him out of the country, right? So, from a human standpoint, this seems to be a good way to ruin people's lives, as opposed to, you know, the legal sort of xenophobic perspective, which is we're getting rid of these troublemaking Brazilians who just hang around on the street and do drugs or sell drugs and, you know, have babies when they're 17, 18 years old, whatever. Right? So the film doesn't, I mean, it leaves open to interpretation, but you really have to kind of dig to think about these things. It's not entirely clear. I think it clearly portrays them in a very honest way. It lets them speak about their own lives, but it doesn't give us the structural background. We don't get to interview the judge who's kicking Eduardo out of the country, who doesn't take into account that he worked 12-hour shifts in a factory at the age of 16, 17, and then went and tutored kids in English after, right? I mean, this is insane. This is really like, okay, you know, Japan doesn't like drugs. They're gonna, you know, kick him out of the country, right? But you know, you kind of see him unravel too. I mean, the physical, it's an aesthetic, you know, thing. You know, you see he's not shaved. His hair is a mess. His eyes are kind of glazed. Like he's dealing with this unfolding trauma.
判断が正解だと思うからそれにしたんだけど
As a focal point of the film, you know, his desire for education is so powerful because, as he keeps saying, without education,
結局俺
you just can't advance, right? Things that we take for granted as given are not given for them.
もう
The expectation was like, go work in a factory at the age of 15,
ブ
16.
ラジルで一人で生き残って
It's like,
いける
if you think about
分の、まあ、お金をここで貯めてからブラジルに帰って大学出て何かのプロになりたい俺は。
what he's saying is, the goal was like, make the money in Japan
8歳の頃にうちのお父さんが亡くなったじゃん。
go back to Brazil, get an education, become a
うち
professional.
のお父さんが亡くなった時には
His father died when he was 8, so when his
俺
father
日本
died,
にいたんだよ。
he was in
で
Japan.
うちのお父さんはブラジルで亡くなって
His father died in Brazil. He didn't see his father when he died.
俺正直信じてなかった。
He said, to be honest, I didn't really believe it,
死んだっていう
that his father had died.
自分の中で思ってたのは、ああいつかお父さんが帰ってくれっていう。
He was always thinking his father's going to come back someday.
俺が18歳の時に夢を見て、
He was 18, he had a dream.
でお父さんが出てきたの。その
And
夢
his
が
father appeared in the dream.
うちのお父さんが俺に言いたかったことは、お前はもう十分大人だから
His
頑張
father,
れみたいな。
his father said to him, you're already an
多分
adult,
それが
and just do your best.
今までの人生で一番嬉しかった。いつも俺を見守ってる父さんにも、まあ多分恥ずかしい思いがいっぱいさせてるけど、それ以上させたくないからね。
So, what he
それを
says,
持って
like,
一人でも
he feels his father is watching over him,
俺はいつまでも頑張る。
and he's embarrassed for what he did, that his father,
俺その
watching over him and seeing what these things he's done that he regrets. All he can do now is try not
場所に馴染むっていうのが
to do anything more to cause shame to his
地方
father.
が寒いね。静岡より。大話題。
The totality of his life that appears. His father died when he's 8. His mother is back in another country. He's basically taking care of himself.
いつかアメリカとかそういうとこで過ごしてみたい。
最初から自分の場所はどこだっていうのが未だに分からない。
He's thinking like for the first time, like, where do I really belong? Where is my
それがない
place?
からそれを自分の力で作るのが俺の一番大きい夢。
So his biggest dream is to, with his own efforts and strength, make that place for
日
himself.
本から出て新しい人生をブラジルで送ろうとした
And so he's
その人たちからずっと来てると思う。自分の人生をぐちゃぐちゃにしてもそのホームをそのファミリーを求めるっていうのが
There's nothing left for him to do now but go back to Brazil and make a life for himself there. Right, do his best. Okay, here we're now ahead 2 more years since Lehman shock, and the documentary filmmakers are following the people, the kids who came back to Brazil. This is Yuri now, and he's in this town called Governador Valadares, which is in Minas Gerais. I looked it up on the map. I mean, I'd heard the name before, but it's really in the middle of nowhere. If you think about Sao Paulo as the center of that Japanese-Brazilian community, this is like a 12-hour car ride, and the roads are not like first world roads. There's like big potholes that break your axle if you go through. So, for Yuri, who's been so used to like Hamamatsu, now this is totally different world. There's not a lot of money now. It's hard to, it's hard to buy things you want. And he's walking around town looking for work. And, passing out his resume. But he's not having a lot of luck. You can even tell in his clothing, right? In Japan, he was kind of showing off with like those fancy clothes and stuff. Well, fancy's the wrong word here. Showy. So he was introduced to a place by his father, but he was refused. So that's what kind of story this is. This is Yuri's dad, and he's saying some all natural products made in Brazil. The story is called Products from the Earth. Love is, father chooses to love nature. So his father doesn't speak that much Japanese. They asked, the interviewers asked what his relation is with his son, and he said, yeah, it's kind of, it's like I taught you guys yesterday, it's chonto. You don't really want to say anything, it's like, not so good. So Yuri, who came back to Brazil to fix his relationship with his dad, isn't having that much success. It's still not really, it's not like they're back to where they should be. So he goes to visit his mom and his grandma. It's not clear to me if they're, I guess the parents may not be together, but he's kind of hanging out at mom and grandma's house. And the father came to talk to him. Probably the directors are putting this together. It doesn't happen spontaneously. And his younger brother is going to translate for his father. The business is different. Is it good that you came back from Japan? No, it's not good. You want to go back to Japan? Yes. There's no work here. Life is hard. The wages are very low. It's like 20,000 yen. Less than $200 a month. So it's really hard to make a living. It's very tough. I think the guy we just saw is one of the filmmakers because we saw him with Eduardo too on the street. So this is Yuri's new girlfriend, who's 19, so is Priscilla, and she's pregnant too. 2 months pregnant. So he's talked to his girlfriend about going back to Japan, and she doesn't know any Japanese, she's just Brazilian, she's not Nikkei anything. So at first she was really like at a loss what to say. It's a totally different world, but you know, she's kind of open to the idea, and she loves this idiot, so she's going to do whatever she has to, you know, keep it going. Kind of a lovable idiot, let's say. Take her to Tokyo, and she's like, oh, I want to see like an anime. Her idea of Japan is like from this pop culture stuff we were talking about yesterday. But she's going to have a baby, she's thinking about the child's future, what's going to be the best thing. For Yuri, the best thing is to go back to Japan. He wants to become, you know, dekasegi, and you know, they'll go work, not be selling drugs or doing stupid things. Yeah, he's talking about his tattoos, that makes it hard for him to work. Because people discriminate against that. When he has a tattoo on his face, that anyone who knows what it means, it's like you're a killer. No one wants to have that look in their supermarket or their pet shop or something. They're scaring customers a lot. So, but in a factory, they don't necessarily care. Right? You're not in customer service. Right? It's like, you know, there's a lot of repetition in what people are saying. Yeah, I want to go back to Japan and work in Japan, you know. You know, it's a complicated thing. In a certain sense, they recognize that they are from a foreign country, Brazil, and this is where they live, but so this is, let me just pause for a second. So this is Otavio. So what Yuri is saying, and you know, it's sort of like the realization is dawning on him that, you know, going back to Japan and working as dekasegi is the only way he's going to make the kind of money to have the lifestyle that he's used to, right? The lifestyle his parents provided for them. Now the family is back in Brazil, they're not making any money. So it's like, as soon as they can go back to Japan, if they can, then they want to. I don't know, because we don't know any of the circumstances. Brazil's economy was doing really well in this period. Some people just paid, you know, their own way back to Brazil. The ticket price between the two countries is probably like, I would guess $2,000, something like that. So if you have a family of 4, or you know, if you have a big family, let's say, like, 6, 7 people, that's a lot of money potentially, especially when you just lost your job and you don't know if you're going to find work somewhere else. So if you paid for yourself and you still have that visa, you can come back to Japan. That's one thing. But if you accepted that like basic buyout, bare minimum buyout, it's like the exact opposite of the golden parachute. This is like the lead parachute. You just get a ticket home, and then they're going to say, you can't come back to Japan for like 7 years. That means you're stuck in Brazil, and if you're not making any money, you're out of work. Now you're really, in a bad situation. So I don't know what the deal was with like Yuri and his family. So we shift next to Otavio, whose family is in Campinas, which is about 40 minutes outside of Sao Paulo. It's a kind of medium-sized, growing city. It has its own international airport and so forth. Everybody's really spread out, right? And he's basically, with Otavio, in some ways, it's even more sad than Yuri, because as much as Yuri is kind of like a gangster hustler wannabe, he's always talking about money and family. Whereas Otavio, although he looks somewhat, well, he's got the acne of being a teenager or whatever, but he's only talking about like the dance group, which has, there's no reality beyond the friendship, the camaraderie, and so forth. So he's saying when he came back to Brazil, he didn't realize until he got there just how vast the country is. It's not like they all live nearby; they can just get together, right? Everyone's like huge distances apart.
その大変なのはでかい大会だけで会うことがそれが本当に寂しいなと思う。
So it's kind of lonely, you thought they'd be able to get back together and see each other once in a while, but it's kind of impossible. So you just sort of lose your friends. So he keeps practicing, in the garage, sort of by himself. They shot it like as though he's like in prison. It's kind of lonely, Houses in Brazil have these gates for their, for protection, because there's a lot of people in the underclass who will rob you at gunpoint, something like that. I was in Sao Paulo a few weeks ago, and I stopped at a red light in a taxi cab, and somebody came up, kid with a gun, and stuck the gun in the driver's face and stole her wallet and her money, and then everybody started to get out of their cars to check on her and see if she's okay. So it's like, when you see that like right in front of your face, it's really scary. I was like, okay, I'm ready to go back to nice, safe Japan. でも俺がここで安心してることは効果の心の中ではまだ変わってない。I couldn't quite hear what he's saying, but he's saying one thing that he feels kind of good about, comfortable, is that Kokai is also coming back to Brazil. It's interesting too. On the one hand, I was being critical of him a moment ago, but Yuri is kind of like, he doesn't really have like some focal point to chasing after money, and his family relationships are bad, complicated, and only going to get more complicated. Whereas like Otavio is, someone who's like, he has that discipline from like dance and so forth. So this is Kolka, and sorry, I might have missed this one too. I was trying to get everything, send it not too late. So Kolka is now back as well. I was talking about like the heat of the summer. It's like the Amazon. They're basically living paycheck to paycheck. And also not a lot of work. Starting to feel a bit different about the group. he's starting to feel differently. He was, he learned a lot on the dance floor and being with his friends, and there was that camaraderie. But it's not the same thing when just by yourself. He's sort of starting his own team in this poor part of town. Trying to recruit people. These are probably what they call a LAN cafe, where people would pay to use the computer, high-speed connection. Making new friends and there's a lot of crime and drugs in this area. This is not a favela, but you can see this is the typical poverty in rural Brazil. It's houses of unreinforced mortar, so just brick and mortar. Sometimes there'll be just a hole for a window. There's no glass. There's no screen. Stuff like that. Dirt roads. Everybody drives a license. He's saying they're riding a motorcycle with sandals on. So Coco's life has totally changed from urban, industrial, hamamatsu neighborhoods in Japan to being out in the country with dirt roads and extreme poverty and so forth. So they're looking for a place where they can practice. They need a flat, paved or better yet, smooth surface. Pavement would rip you to shreds, so you really need something like granite, something like that. In New York, when kids would breakdance, they would take cardboard boxes, big like a refrigerator box, and flatten it, and they would lay it on the floor so that when you were spinning on the floor, you didn't get ripped up. So they kind of found a place to practice. Obviously, Brazil has its own, culture of dance and music, and hip hop was very easily assimilated into that. But this style of dance is, comes out of New York City in the 1970s and especially 80s. It's not, it's not samba, it's not forró, it's not any of the typical dance styles of Brazil. Capoeira, which does look somewhat like, the moves of kicks and flips and things like that, has a little bit of, compatibility, but this is all basically American, African-American street culture. So, Polka is coming from Japan and teaching them all this, sort of the culture. He says he comes from a very poor background, was raised without this opportunity, so You know, he chose to learn hip hop dance and so forth versus, you know, getting caught up in selling drugs and things like that. You know, it's very similar to what was going on in Japan in the sense that it's that bonding with their friends and having a community is some you know, social relationships that are positive to focus on instead of getting caught up in, you know, negative things and basically just being out on the street with nothing to do.
そうですね、僕が住んでる人はやっぱり目的がなくて、それでも一日中ブラブラしたり、そうやっぱり
The narrative that focuses on Ottavio and Coca, I mean, we really see this sort of flexibility to adapt to a totally different milieu.
そういう人たちをやっぱり一歩一歩対して、その道から取りたいしたいんですよね。
So hip hop provides them with that you know, path to do something constructive.
自分が育った街っていうのもあるし。
It's kind of, I mean, it's not the main focus of the film. It's kind of cool that, you know, hip hop becomes the culture that carries Ottavio and Coca through that transition and beyond. So this is Paula at 7 a.m. It's about 2 years since she left Japan. She's 17 years old, and she's going to work. And she's working. She's I think the only one who's supporting her family. She lives in a town called Sao Bernardo de Campos, which is about 30-40 minutes outside of Sao Paulo. So she's taking the bus, which, you know, poor people do. Everyone who has a car doesn't take the bus. She's saying, you know, I want to have fun, I'm a kid, but I have to work. So it's tough. She's working in this office that looks like a prison.
ブラジル来ていいんだよ、なんか好きなんだよ。でもやっぱ心の底になんか本当は自分で分かってるんだけど、なんかここじゃないんだよねみたいな。やっぱ日本で生まれて日本で育ったから。
She likes Brazil, she's happy, but at the bottom of her heart, she feels like she doesn't really belong here, that Japan is her home.
この1年と7ヶ月で自分でなんか感じるんだよ、すごい成長したなみたいな。
Saying how much she has
そう
grown
いう成長を大事に
in the past
していきたい
year.
なみたいな。そういう今生きてて、その今生きてるこの感情、この考え方とか、そういうのを将来に持っていきたいな。
She wants to keep it going, you know, like she wants to not lose that feeling that she has now, that she's really grown a lot. Treasure that experience of having matured so much in a year. So she's getting I think this is the phone bill, and she's like paying the bills, you know, as they go. The part that follows now, they're asking her, so did you just pay the bill? Like 300 something payouts, which is, well, the exchange rate was different then. It'd be like $100 bill. They don't have a lot of money right now. She's the only one working, so like when they don't pay the bills, the electricity gets cut off. So it's like you pay one bill, then you pay the other, and your service gets cut off. usually within like a day or two. If you don't pay the bill, you know what I mean? That's it. They just turn it off. So there's eight members of her family who are living together under the same roof. That's her mom.
超なんか仕事ばっかで自分のために生きてなかった感じ
And
が
then her dad is on the other side.
ブラジル来てから超にぎやかになんか
We'll see him in a
も
minute.
っと気をつけてなんか髪の毛とかも服とかも格好とかも
That's her dad. Guys, the same. You know, she's saying like, you know, when they have money, you can, you know, do your nails and your hair and focus about your clothing. But when money is so tight, you just, you know, you just have to.
ちっちゃい時から暴力ってすごいなくなるって毎日お母さんに殴られて親に毎日殴られてたけ
So,
ど
you know, like her parents worked so hard when she was younger, like she never saw
し
them.
てたけど
And now everyone's like in the house because they got nowhere to go. They have no work.
そんなのどうでもいいんだよなんか過去には親がいなかったからそんなのどうでもよくて今大事にしてくれるんだったら今私のこと全部知ってるんだったら私はそれでいい
She's much more focused on her family. When we saw her at the beginning, like she wasn't really close with her parents. It was like her boyfriend was more important to her. And now she's like, it doesn't matter about the past, but I want to have a good relationship with my family. I want to help take care of my family. I don't know where they were when they first came back to Brazil because it didn't say, but they're very clearly in a smaller, not as like fancy apartment.
仕事はねもう私仕事も宿題に押しつぶされて
Talking about doing homework. She's got all her books there for studying. As a 17-year-old, I'm pretty sure she has to be in school in Brazil. It's a sometimes like very easygoing country, but they do have compulsory education. So she goes to night school
ブラジルって
every day for 4 hours.
頑張ればどこにでもたどり着けるんだと思う私とか今17歳じゃんどんどん登れるわけじゃんだからブラジル来てなんか気づいたんだよその頑張ればできるんだよね
She's saying in Brazil, if you work hard, you can do anything. If you just
自分の将来って自分で
study hard and
で
so
こっち
forth.
に来てなんか
I think a lot of people don't agree with that, but she feels that way about Brazil. So she's coming out now from 4 hours of class, night class, right, at 11 p.m.
勉強する気分じゃなかった
I'm like terrified to walk around in those type of neighborhoods at 11 p.m. Like, so, you know, it's just how it goes, but I've been to São Bernardo de Campos. I had a girlfriend who is from there, and it's a very different experience when you've been to both places. It's not like, oh, they were on one side of the world and they're another. There's no reality. It's like when you know both of these places, it's a different feeling. I don't remember hearing about what happened to her boyfriend, but he seems back in Brazil. Excuse me, back in Japan. But he seems to be out of the picture. She's not allowed to smoke in the kitchen, obviously. So
まあやめよって言うんだけど、こういう感じそうなると服装だけど。
I couldn't quite hear what she was saying, but she can't smoke in her. She's like, I mean, she doesn't really have her own room. She doesn't have her own space in the house, so she's kind of like smoking out the window.
だって私日本で仕事してたし、全部自分の欲しいものあったし、なんで私が生まれ育ったところからこんなもう180度違うところにさ連れてこられなきゃいけない。なんで連れてくるの私はみたいな。たまにあるけどそういうの。
It's the same.
なんで私向こうの方が友達いっぱいいたのに向こうの方がなんか家にいるって感じがしたのに、なんでそうやってこっちに来なきゃいけないの。こっち来て私死ぬほど仕事して死ぬほど勉強して何みたいなって思うけど、たまにね。でもやっぱ今は全部私全部プラス思考にしてるから何も構わずもためになったんだなみたいな。今仕事してれば将来車買えるし自分の免許取れるし。
She's actually.
勉強は
Stop it. We're almost at the end anyway, but
でもたまにあるよやっぱ。
she sounds very much like, like a girl as opposed to a woman in this part. And she's like, it's really unfair. Like, why is it that I was born and raised in Japan and I worked in Japan, and then I have to get like I have to like go all the way to the other side of the world, and work here and do this and that. And she's like, sometimes I really feel it's so unfair. Why did I have to go through all of this? Why couldn't I just like stay in Japan? And she said, okay, I understand. Like I'm studying and I'm working, and I'll go to college. I'll be able to afford to buy a car. I mean, she has a hard time right now, but she kind of sees a path forward. But she's 17 years old. It's like she's not an adult. It's like you really kind of have to remember. She's like, she goes to work, she goes to school late at night. She's having a cigarette because she's like stressed out. Like Eduardo was probably like smoking marijuana because he lost his job, his family's far away, everything is like, it's just, the pressure that these kids are under is like incredible. And so that narrative that Eduardo focuses on of becoming stronger, it's like, it's like a diamond under pressure. But the other side of it is it breaks you, right? You just break under pressure and, you just do something stupid. You do something that is, going to get you in trouble. So getting pregnant, getting arrested for drugs, right? But yeah, I think we're almost at the end here. So.
なんでみたいな。なんで私こういうことしなきゃいけないの。なんで
Why me? Why this? Why do I have to go through all this?
探しても出てくるものじゃないから。
She keeps asking herself, but there's no answer.
だから捨てたっていうか諦めたことあるし、何度もゼロからやり直したこともあるし。
Things she had to give up, things she had to throw away, and start over from zero.
人間ってどんどんちっちゃくなっていく感じがするんで、どんどん弱くなっていく感じがするんだよね。本当に前みたいに根性焼きとかしたくないし、リストカットとか本当に自分を傷つけて何ももらえないじゃん。
It feels so
私
small.
こうやって自分の手見て7個もあと残ってるなみたいな、そういうの見ると本当になんで自分はちっちゃい人間なんだなんで
To feel like such a small person, like you can't change your fate and everything. Like you want to make plans and it just doesn't work out.
人が自分の背中を押すのを待ってるんじゃなくて、自分から進まなきゃいけないっていうのを気づいたんだから、誰かからじゃあ今行こうって手をこうやって出されるのを待つより、自分から
Instead of waiting for someone else to do for her, she feels like she's realizing that it's like if she doesn't do it herself, for herself, it won't happen. In terms of education and work and all that other stuff. So I think this is the end. And then they come back to this very cellular music. Okay. Stop there. Sorry. I'm gonna get that infernal sound out of our ears. Sorry. So why don't we take a break and we have about an hour left, so we can really try to discuss what we've seen. I hope my voiceover was helpful